So reminder, I do not have a screener right now, so I'm using the auto screener. So trigger warning, anything can get said. This is live. Chewey D, you are on with Jenna and Ethan. How are you?
Hey, Ethan and Jenna, right?
Yep.
Yes.
How you doing?
All right. Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'm doing good now. It's a beautiful day here.
It is? Where you at?
It was deconversion in East Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
Deconversion stories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're checking up on you, seeing how you're doing. Share what you like.
Yeah, that's a good topic. So I've had like a couple of deconversions, I guess, but when I was, 12 years old, just as real as my kitty cat sitting here with me, God was real, it never occurred to me that it wasn't. And I remember watching some movie, and that movie was like a horror movie. It was a really cheesy movie. It doesn't matter what it is, but it had demon possession in it. I was like, it freaked me out because I knew there was demons in the Bible, and they possessed some pigs and some people and things like that. So I'm like, oh, that could really happen. And the way it happened in the movie was distressing or whatever for a 12-year-old. And so, that fear or whatever lingered with me for a week or whatever, and all my thoughts about things were popping up. And then I remember where I was. I remember like what time it was and who was sitting in front of me in class when I was 12 years old. When that first time the thought came up, like, could God not be real? And for a year and a half, I was like diagnosable, or I don't remember what they said, but like I had severe anxiety, basically is what it was. And I had the weirdest symptoms that came along with it. Like I was afraid of contamination. Like if I didn't believe, just if the thought of doubt passed my mind, that I knew I was damned to go to hell, and all the bad things that are in there are going to happen to me. And like I was chanting at myself like mantras, like Jesus is Lord, and I was just I was like trying to build the wall back up. I had gotten a hole smashed in it, and I had all sorts of contamination issue, like fears, like I didn't want to drink out of this cup, or there was all sorts of weird superstitious stuff that was going on. It got really bad. And, I was just beside myself for a year and a half, really. And my parents were like, let's get some counseling. And, they take me to the guy at church who's the Christian counselor or whatever. It was a nightmare. So I think when that kind of thing happens, especially in that's a special stage in your life when you're 12, you're supposed to be doing fun, good things. It can be really developmentally, impacting when you're trying to come up and, that kind of thing happens to you.
Sorry, please.
Well, that's basically it. I mean, I think how somebody would go about addressing that to a kid, or if a kid had questions and it didn't just happen really like starkly like that. It didn't hit them as hard, maybe like easing somebody out of things like that. I understand the importance of that, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of great methods that I know of, at least to ease people out of it. I didn't have it back then, I'll tell you that much.
Is this your kid we're talking about?
It's me. That was me.
You were saying how should it have happened? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What would I do if I was having that problem?
Okay, so what would have been a good idea to give a child a better experience with something like that?
Well, first, if they're raised, I don't think that it could always work out for somebody, because if they're raised in a Christian household, and my parents still are very Christian and all that, they're not going to seek some type of secular help and be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, none of this does make any sense, Matt. You need to go and, try and get yourself, just find something that works for you. They're going to try and reinforce the thing. And that almost made it worse, because some of the counselors that they took me to, there's a lady down the street at the time. Mm-hmm. She's not I don't think she was any kind of registered person, but she was kind of the wise lady on the street, and was closer to, I don't know, I guess had more say about religious stuff than my parents did as far as putting it into words. And she made it 10 times worse, and was saying that demons can, physically attack us and mentally attack us, and just saying, giving me the whole scoop on demonic mythologies and stuff, is what I'd call it now. And I got that made it just 10 times worse. And, you know, the guy at church that they took me to didn't try and drop. I think he was an actual child psychologist or had some degree in that, and wasn't just like, hey, you know, you better figure it out in one way or another, or you're going to go to hell. But
did they give you any kind of solution?
No. Basically, like, and I don't want to dominate your time here, but
no, you're good.
that kind of led to my second, what are we calling it? Deconversion. So basically, just like anything that happens, I mean, I'm sure, and I still feel like I am, you know, when something happens that early in your life, it definitely leaves marks on you. And I'm sure I have some kind of neurosis or whatever from that. But, you know, time went on, and I just kind of got used to living in that, and I stopped, you know, saying mantras to myself, and I stopped being worried about the demons trying to come out and get me all the time. And I just kind of forgot about it. And I guess I got in my 20s, and I got into, you know, playing music and going to school and having friends and stuff. And so I was distracted well enough to where it went away after a while, after years, you know. For a year and a half, it was really like over the top. I don't know if I slept that year really, unless I just passed out, you know. And then, you know, years later, I think I had some trouble, like just personal life stuff. And I kind of was turning around, and my mom and family were like, come on to church. And I hung out at church for a while, and I sort of rededicated myself to church stuff and religious thinking, Baptist style, and got into that for a while. And that's when I actually started kind of reading the Bible. I'd read it, you know, I'd kind of gotten into reading a bunch of books by then. I wasn't a bigger reader when I was 12. And I started reading it, and I ran into things, you know, like you guys probably know, it's an atheist show on television. Anyway, there's a lot of the people that kind of do what you guys do. And
what show are you referring to?
Having a lot of things, a lot of different ones that were pointed at, verses and things are pointed at me too, and I couldn't reconcile the stuff that was in the Bible anymore. And so that one, there was a lot more logic involved with that deconversion, and I wasn't the, you know, super hormone charged 12-year-old. And so that one was a lot easier. And so now it doesn't bother me at all. And really, it is freeing. Like, you know, there was kind of, even after that second deconversion, I just had to be like, oh, wow, I don't get heaven now if I'm going to, you know, go ahead. Well, I couldn't choose to believe. I don't think we choose that, but in the, you know, mindset that I was in, I was like, oh yeah, I don't get heaven anymore. Well, and that really gave me a lot more meaning in my life, and knowing that, you know, hey, this is what I got, and I'm gonna make it great. And I love things. It's so much better. But yeah, it's a super challenge. And when I read a lot of the stuff that's going on, just a lot of indoctrination stuff in general.
Right.
How long has it been?
That is important. I mean, I think years now. That's definitely a gradual thing. But, you know, the comfort level that I'm with now, I'm 40 years old now, has been for 5 years, something like that. You know, after I've been watching these shows that come on, you know, watching on my YouTube and things like that, it just makes it easier and easier to, like, the old memories that still stick around and the little hooks that are in you. I'm plucking those out all the time, and I don't feel those tugging at me anymore emotionally. So it's great.
Can I ask? Oh, go ahead.
If I missed this, I apologize. But did you say you are an atheist now?
Yes.
And do you currently? Because I know some still struggle with like nightmares of hell. Like, do you ever think about that? Do you worry about that, or where are you at mentally on that?
You know, I think there's. That's a really good question. I don't have nightmares of it. I have really good dreams and stuff most of the time. I certainly did have a lot of nightmares when I was 12 and 13 and all that. It was just, you know, constant, what do you call that? Paranoia about all those things, even into my sleep. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the actual logical and rational reconciliation of all of this has fleshed out the subconscious enough to where I don't have any reservations about it. You know, I did have not a near-death experience, but I thought I might get killed by. I have an allergy to the yellow jackets. My dad almost got killed by them one year, but anyway, I got stung by a couple of yellow jackets, and I rushed myself to the hospital, and they did all the things to treat me. But I had a serious situation for a second on my hands, and in that, you know, I had a lot of things crossing my mind, and they weren't even, I was happy after the fact to know that I wasn't like begging for heaven or begging for a deity to save me. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yeah, if I die, I die or whatever, but I'm not going to sit there. I couldn't even get there. I couldn't cognitively get myself to be afraid for God's hell anymore. And I'm glad I don't have that fear weighing me down.
Well, good. I'm glad you don't too. I usually refer to myself as one of the lucky ones because I am fortunate enough to not really care. Like the hell thing doesn't bother me. Yeah. So.
You said something that really, really piqued my interest. You said that you toned out your subconscious enough.
I think I said flushed it out. Like you can definitely have things that reside, concepts or fears or whatever that reside in your subconscious actively. And I think over time, those things can change. They can stay there or they can come or go. It can always revert, I guess. But like, I think when I was, 16, when I really hadn't quite recovered, but the stuff was kind of just in the back burner, if I had the bee sting, the stings or whatever, or near death situation where I thought I might die, I probably would have been begging for Jesus and begging to, worrying about hell, etc. Then, because that stuff was still in my subconscious, floating around in there, trying to find a place to sit down or whatever. It's been so long now, and I've had all the different rational conversations with myself and that I see on TV on the shows with others, like your show, that it's, I guess, flushed out. Like those kind of thoughts and concepts don't even have an address, so to speak, in my subconscious anymore. And so like, it's hard to even conjure those fears, regardless of what happens, up to and including a touch of possible death. You know what I'm saying? As far as the sting situation. Yeah.
What have you replaced that with?
All the fears and things like that?
No, your old solution to your problem, which was to just pray to Jesus. What have you replaced that with? What do you do now when you're in a situation to where you would have done that? You say that you flushed it out. What is there instead now?
Well, even after my second logical, rational reckoning with deconversion, I still had a lot of irrational fears that were just based on like all of the religious mythos, and also I've got a pretty wild imagination anyway. And it's not like I'm afraid, it's not as if was afraid of the dark or anything, but like, it might have been just some leftover stuff from the childhood impact, the trauma. But when I would walk around at night, my imagination would get the best of me. And like when you look into darkness kind of wiggles around. And anyway, my imagination would get away from me and I would be afraid. I would have fear. So to answer your question, what do I replace it with now? Like, I think I decided, some years ago that whatever is out there, or whatever my wildest imaginings could be, possibly the boogeyman or hells, or even just the fear of death, like the uncomfortable thing that might happen that brings you to your end. I would rather let it, whatever it is, get me than spend a single second being afraid. Right. There's a movie, and I hate to be cheesy, but I love sci-fi. There's actually a remake of this movie coming out soon.
It's called. Say that again.
Movie titles.
What was that?
But you ever heard of Dune? It's a movie from the '80s, and there's a remake.
I've heard of the book.
Yeah, there's a book. That's what it came from originally. But
okay, I didn't know if it was the same thing.
Like a mantra against fear in it, and it's pretty good. I don't know it right off the top of my head, so I won't recite it. But it's basically like, when fear comes along, I will let the fear pass over me and pass through me. And when it's gone, I'll look back and there won't be anything there but me. I'm still here. And so I would rather just basically jettison fear in a lot of forms. I mean, I'll run from a grizzly bear or a guy with a gun or whatever, but anything that's irrational or anything I couldn't help, I've trained my mind enough to kind of get over fear.
That's good.
Entirely.
Well,
not something that we really focus on. It's not really something that they teach kids to, because a lot of people require you to have fear to get your money. Or
well, fear is a useful emotion. That's something that I've learned, is that,
in context.
well, hold on. So like fear, anger, even anxiety, these are not negative emotions. It's when you experience them in excess or in extreme levels that they become a problem. But you experience them for a reason. Your emotions are things that you have learned throughout time. Your subconscious collects them, right? And then it's not necessarily based off of logic. It's based off of like repetition, but it collects it, and your subconscious is trying to speak out for you, because in case your logic thinking part of your brain can't think quickly enough, in case, for example, when your adrenaline kicks in, right? It's like, oh, something bad's going to happen. We know it. So, or when you have another emotion, when you experience happiness or when you experience anger, your emotions are trying to tell you something. So experiencing anger or even like guilt is not a negative emotion. It's telling you that you have somehow betrayed yourself morally. Shame is a negative emotion in the sense that shame is where you internalize it and you take it to mean that you are therefore a bad person. That's not useful. That's something that is used negatively. But guilt, if you can learn to talk to yourself and turn that emotion to guilt, it's useful in being true to yourself and remaining honest and remaining whoever it is you want to be. You know what I mean? So it's just something that I've learned, is that not feeling emotions isn't necessarily a good thing. It's learning, okay, I feel something, maybe learn how to put it on the back burner long enough to come back to it later to deal with it, but make sure you deal with it because it's there for a reason. You know what I mean?
Right.
Again, this is not coming from a therapist. This is coming from somebody who's just obsessively interested in psychology and all that. So I'm a peer.
Yeah, no, right on. I agree with that. I think getting rid of the irrational ones is good, and paying attention to the ones like you said, if you're calling it guilt, your conscience or whatever, that is important, and trying to keep your affinity the way you want it in the direction. I agree. Jenna.
Like, make sure you evaluate, is it guilt or shame? Why? And then try to talk to yourself the right way, and when you feel anger, is this justified anger? And it gives you, it's trying to bring your attention to something,
I'll leave you with one more thing, and I'll get off and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.
In everything that you just said and what I was talking about fear earlier and all that, a lot of folks, take your pick of YouTube folks. Matt Dillahunty's one of these. I'm not really 100% sure what his full take on it is, so I'm not putting words in his mouth. But what I've taken from all these different sources and put together and have my own take on is the free will argument. I do see, like a lot of us, we do give meaning to our lives, and there are patterns and things going on in a human life, but a lot of this stuff is what happened before, a result of what happened before directly. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of like what our choices and how we would assess that guilt, how we would assess the fears, all that stuff is kind of just chemicals bouncing around. And that also, it is kind of like, I don't want to say it's discouraging really, but it is freeing also in a way. So as far as like the anger goes, I think what made me think of all this is Jenna was saying, should you be angry at the thing, or is the guilt in the right place, or whatever? Are you dialing your emotions in right? It really helps me forgive people or forgive myself, and not light up with emotion really quickly if I get cut off in traffic or whatever. And I just understand that I think everything's in motion, and people are kind of quote unquote doing the best that they can, even if they're a total jackass or whatever. I guess the free will argument, or the lack of free will argument, gives a lot of latitude for letting things go easy. That's it.
Oh yeah. It's kind of like, it's like the emotion isn't about me. It's about that person. When that person is angry at me on the road, they're having a bad day. It's not that they think that I'm a bad person because they know me, they're having a bad day. It's not about me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all mess up, so try not to react to everything.
Definitely.
And understanding that it's working out great. And, I do owe a lot to people who are in your position. I haven't heard this show before. I think I saw something about it for a second. Yeah, last week. I thought it was a show about cats or dogs.
Yeah, so each week, we are going to cover, it's pretty much like an everything show. We have just been covering mental health and other topics. So last week it was mental health, like how do pets contribute to your mental health? Today, deconversions in mental health.
Yeah.
Next week, have no idea, but we'll figure that out.
Cool. I wish you guys luck in the show.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for calling and sharing your experiences. And I hope you have a wonderful week.
And if you feel like you have friends that might benefit from calling in and sharing experiences as well, tell them about it, because we're trying to be a good, supportive peer show where people can talk.
Yes. And,
it is good to talk.
So thank you, Chewey.
Thank you for calling.